Hello and welcome to Inside Economics. I'm Mark Zandi. I'm the chief economist of Moody's Analytics, and I'm joined by a few of my colleagues today. First, Ryan Sweet, head of real-time economics. It's good to have you, Ryan. And we're going to spend a lot of time with you today, I suspect, because today is Jobs Day, and we got a big jobs report, and I know you've dug deep into that, so we'll come back to that in just a second. And then Chris Dorides, deputy chief economist. And always good for a few jokes. So we'll see how that goes today. We'll count on those. And then we also have Dante DeAntonio. Dante, how long have you been with us? How long have you worked at Moody's Analytics?
My 5-year anniversary is this weekend.
Oh my goodness, 5 years. Are we now? Does Moody's give you anything for a 5-year anniversary? Oh, you have
a certificate.
A certificate?
I think you got to make it to 10.
Yeah. Did you guys you got your 10-year, right? I mean, you got an email saying, congratulations, 10-year anniversary. Go to this website, pick out what you want. Do you guys remember what you picked out? What'd you pick out, Chris?
I got a toaster. One of those.
How did that work out for you?
It's still going. So, you know.
Still going. Okay. Very good.
Positive.
And Ryan, what did you get?
I think I got a set of kitchen knives.
Now that's a good choice. I'd say that's a good choice.
They were nice. They worked.
Yeah. I got a bike.
You got a bike. Wow.
Yeah. It didn't work. It really didn't work. Yeah. I mean, that could be me. You know.
So wait, Moody's didn't buy you. They didn't buy you the Peloton.
No, not the Peloton.
I was going to say.
This is actually
a different list.
10 year? No, wait. It wasn't 10 years. It was my 20-year anniversary, right? Because when I sold the company to Moody's, I was grandfathered in as an employee. So I was already a 15-year-long employee when we signed on with Moody's. And so at my 20th, I think I got a 30th, but I can't even remember what that prize was or what that gift was. But I know for my 20th, it was like a bike, well before Peloton, and it's still next to my Peloton. Yeah, still next to my Peloton. I'm not kidding. Yeah. So Dante, I'm sorry. I guess there's no 5-year gift. Otherwise you'd know by now. Sorry about this phone. We'll let this pass.
All right.
This is just the way it goes.
This is
live radio.
Unvarnished.
Unvarnished podcast. So Dante, you came to us from Bureau of Labor Statistics. Is that correct?
I worked there first, and then I went to grad school, and then I came here.
Oh, I didn't know that. So you out of undergrad, you went to BLS. How long were you at BLS?
About 2 years.
You know, Dante, you are lagging. Your connection is pretty bad, I think. So I don't know. If you got anything open, I'd close it. See if that helps. And then you went to grad school. Where'd you go to grad school?
Lehigh.
Oh, Lehigh. Oh, very good. And did you do a thesis on labor market conditions? Because you were.
My dissertation was actually in sports economics.
No way. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, what was it?
Labor
All
market
right,
implications. So, it was three parts: valuations of college basketball players, the impact of holdouts on NFL contract negotiations, and the impact of sports arenas on local labor markets.
Oh, all three of those are pretty interesting topics. I mean, in your first essay on it was college basketball, did you like determine what the market value was of college ball players? Was that part of it?
Yeah, we tried to estimate the marginal revenue product basically of college basketball players, and it worked out to be on average something like $200,000, which there's a huge disparity in distribution where superstar players at big programs are probably worth 5, 10, 20 times that much, and then your average bench player at a run-of-the-mill school is worth almost nothing to the university.
So what were the highest valued players worth, roughly?
In excess of $1 million a year.
And that was back, well, now 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. So, yeah, I don't know if that
Yeah, that data was late 2000s. Yeah.
Late 2000s. Yeah, right. Well, good. Well, thank you for joining, because you are now are doing a lot of work in labor market issues. And of course, this is, again, Jobs Day, so we're going to be spending a fair amount of time on the labor market. And I just want to call out that you and I have worked on a number of papers, and our most recent paper, it's coming soon, is on racial inequality, racial bias, and its macroeconomic consequences. And you've done some really good empirical work there that we're writing about, and we're going to publish in the next week or two. So stay tuned for that. So thank you for that. Okay, as the listener of this podcast knows, there's three parts to it. Part one is the data. We're going to talk a bit about what happened in the past week, maybe what's going to happen in the coming week. Talk about our favorite statistics, and jobs will be number one. Second, the big topic, and well, it's Jobs Day. We're going to talk about jobs and a lot of questions surrounding the labor market, a lot of odd things going on. So we'll talk about that, and then finally, I'll bring it all together at the end. So let's start off. Ryan, what's your statistic of the week? What's your data point?
I'm going to give you guys an underhanded softball.
Underhanded softball. Okay.
Yep. Because last week you gave me a lot of grief
as opposed to an overhanded softball, an underhanded softball. There is no such thing as an overhanded
right.
softball.
Yeah, we need to sit down. We gotta talk.
Right.
That's baseball.
That's
baseball's over.
Right. That's baseball. That's baseball. I'm so confused. Okay. Right.
All right, well, while you're confused, I'll give you the number. 77.1%.
77.1%.
Your clue is it's in the employment report,
okay.
and it's a very important indicator of gauging where we are.
Oh, is that the EPOP for prime age workers?
Correct.
EPOP.
Good job.
What's EPOP? You want to tell everyone what EPOP is?
That was just the prime age employment to population ratio.
Yeah, right. And why is that? Why do you think that's such an important statistic?
Well, I mean, throughout the last expansion, that did the best job of showing how much slack or the lack thereof in the labor market was throughout the business cycle. So just like we are now, we're hearing lots of anecdotes, in the Beige Book, the ISM survey, that there's labor shortages, but there aren't labor shortages. It's just a very difficult hiring environment. There's a lot of people that are between 25 and 54, which is the prime age, that are sitting on the sidelines for various reasons that we'll probably dig a lot deeper into. But at least historically, once you get to 80%, that's a good threshold that's when we're at full employment. Anytime you're below it, it's there's still some slack in the labor market. And why we want to look at full employment is once we hit that, that's when we start to develop a lot of inflationary pressures, and that's when the Fed will start getting worried that this transitory inflation will turn to something worse.
Right. And as I recall, EPOP for prime age workers 25 to 54 years old hit its low back in April of last year at 70%. So it was a little bit above 80 coming into the pandemic. It fell 10 percentage points. And as you point out, we're now back to 77.1%. So that means we're 3 percentage points away from that full employment threshold.
Correct.
Okay. And if everything kind of sticks to script in terms of job growth, participation, and everything, when do you think EPOP will be over that rising or approaching or rising over that at 80% threshold?
Well, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it's close to when you're expecting it. So end of next year, early 2023.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
It hurts to say.
This is what happens when I give you an underhanded softball.
Yeah, I swing and I hit it.
Yeah, you hit it.
I hit it. Yeah. So that's the way and I think you're absolutely right about EPOP. I think that's probably, if I had to pick one kind of measure of the state of where we are in the business cycle and the labor market conditions and how close we are to full employment, it would be EPOP. But the other way to think about it is in terms of job growth, right? So we got 500. Oh, by the way, you do deserve accolades, right? Because your expectation for the number for the today was 600K, I believe, right? On the
Correct.
notes. And it came in at 559. So that's great. Very, very close. And the consensus was
673.
673.
And the range was around 250 to 1 million.
Right.
So,
right. So anyway, great job. I mean, you always do a great job on the, you're one of the best in the world. If not, I actually think you are the best. It will, you ultimately, everyone will recognize this, but I recognize it first. You are the very best at doing this. So, and you did a great job with today's number. But the other way of kind of thinking about getting back to full employment is also in terms of employment. Getting all those 7.6 million jobs were still down from the pre-pandemic level back, and then some, because of course the labor force continues to grow and you need to absorb those workers. And participation. And if you look at job growth, average monthly job growth, including May in the past several months, it's about 500K per month. So if you say, okay, that's what I think it's going to continue to do more or less going forward, that means we'll get those 7.6 million jobs back and then some by the end of 2022. And another way of thinking about it is 500K a month. That's probably enough to get the unemployment rate moving down a 1/10 of a percentage point every month or two. And again, if you do the arithmetic, we're at 5.8, we'll get below 4, closer to 3.5 by late 2022. So another way of thinking about this. So let me ask you this, Ryan. Was there anything in the report that really, it felt like it was a kind of down the fairway, using another sports metaphor, kind of report? Was there anything in the report that you found surprising?
I mean, when I first looked at, where the forecast was wrong, it was in retail, and there was a big drop in grocery stores, and I just couldn't figure out. I think it was down more than 20,000. It just seems odd. I know restaurants are coming back, but it just seemed a little bit fluky that you saw a drop there.
Well, you know what? Second month. Last month was even larger. I think it was. I didn't look at the revision, but it was down 50 or 60,000. I think last month. So, but don't you just describe that to people going out, and so therefore?
Yeah, I think so.
Fewer groceries, right? Okay.
But the other thing that was surprising was motor vehicle and parts manufacturing. That was up more than 20,000. With all the semiconductor or the chip problems and lack of production and lean new car inventory. I think this is a tentative good sign that we might start to get more production, even though the supply chain issues aren't resolved. But hopefully we'll be able to pick up production soon.
Yeah. Hey, before I ask Dante about his statistic, and I'm sure it's a one on the jobs numbers too, is 600K. Was there some secret sauce, something that you can tell us about, what you're doing that got you closer than consensus? And by the way, again, just so everyone knows, you do this consistently. You beat the consensus perspective and you get closer to the actual employment and other statistics. You get very, very close. So in this case, was there something that you did that got you closer than consensus?
Well, I don't want to give away like how the sausage is made, but okay. I mean, there's a couple things that have been working really well recently, and I'm sticking with that. So this model has worked really well. Get you in the ballpark, and then of course, like there's some intricacies to each month that you got to factor in. Off the podcast, I'll give you a clue. As long as you promise not to go on CNBC or CNN and be like, this is the new golden ticket.
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know. Okay, I promise. I'll do that. I won't tell anybody. I'm good at secrets.
Are you putting more weight on claims, Ryan?
Less weight.
Less weight. So it's still
like versus signal. Yeah, versus pre-pandemic. Yeah, I put a lot less weight on claims.
And I guess a lot less weight on ADP too, right? Because that was on the hot side. And by the way, Dante puts together that ADP number. So
you approve it though. So
yeah. Well, I have no choice. You tell me I have to approve it.
When that number came out, I emailed Dante, and
Yeah.
I was like speechless. I was like, "What is that?" I was like, "There's no way we're getting close to 1 million. 1 month down the road, we're going to get close to 1 million. Just it wasn't going to be in May."
Well, I don't know. I mean, Dante, what do you say about that? The ADP, for everyone who doesn't know, is a human resource company, has clients that account for about the same size of the job market that the BLS surveys every month. So it's a very large look into the labor market. And I mean, looking at the numbers, it was strong. There was no sign of any softness or weakness in that report. And again, it came in just south of 1 million, and that's private sector. It doesn't include government. Government was up pretty solidly in the month, according to BLS. So Dante, what did you see anything in the ADP number that indicated any kind of weakness to you? I didn't see it.
Nothing in particular. I think, to Ryan's point about claims, I think we're giving claims a little more weight now than we should be in the model.
I see. That may
And to be fair,
yeah,
pre-pandemic, I put a lot of emphasis on ADP.
Yeah.
It was helpful. I just think now the way, I mean, claims was, in probably everybody's, employment model. And, those that are, still wedded to that are, getting larger forecast errors, I think.
Yeah, although even if you look at we call the pure ADP, it does not, it's not, doesn't go through the model. It's not affected by anything other than taking the ADP data and making sure that it lines up to BLS in terms of the industry weighting and the company size weighting. That was also strong. I mean, it was really strong. No sign of any weakness. Like the declining construction jobs, that did not show up in ADP at all. And that's ADP covers that pretty well. So that was surprising to me.
My gut is that once we get all the revisions, it won't close the gap between BLS and ADP, but it will make it look much less glaring.
Yeah, actually, I want to come back to that because I have a theory I want to pass by you guys, see what you think. But so Dante, what's your statistic? You have one, right? You were prepared. You came prepared, didn't you?
I had three,
not anyone gets on this podcast. You are invited on this podcast. It is an honor to be on this podcast. So okay.
I had three just in case somebody stole one, so I was prepared.
You're prepared. Okay, very good.
431,000.
Oh, that's easy. I got that one.
Oh, is that don't tell me, is that private sector employment gain?
Nope.
No, it's not. Oh, okay. Chris, do you know? What is it again? 400 and what?
Oh, 431,000.
I got it.
This is a good one.
I got it.
I really like this one. I was going to pick this one, but then I knew you guys were going to scream at me that this is too much in the weeds.
No. I think this was the most positive thing in the report.
All right, go ahead, Chris.
Really? Wait, don't tell. I get another thing. The increase in household. No, I couldn't. No, household employment. No, that's not right. I give up. What is it?
I'll give the guess. It's the decline in the long-term unemployed.
Exactly.
That's right.
Okay, very good.
It's by far the largest decline since the pandemic. It's only the second decline, I think, at all since the pandemic started, and by far the largest.
That's interesting. And give us context. How many long-term unemployed are there, and where does it stand relative to pre-pandemic? That kind of thing.
Sure. That decline brought it to 3.8 million, which is still well elevated. Pre-pandemic, it was about 1.25.
Okay, so we're still up 2.4 million.
Yeah, about 2.5 million, around there.
And is that, when you say long-term unemployed, that's not quite consistent with permanently unemployed, but they're probably very closely related.
Right. Long-term unemployed is unemployed for more than 26 weeks.
Right. Okay. That was a really good one, Dante. I thought that was great. I don't know what Ryan's talking about,
No, I said that was a good number. It was probably the most important one in their whole report.
Yeah.
So one question, I have my opinion, but a number of states started, in early May saying that they were going to end the expanded UI benefits starting in June and July.
Uh-huh.
Could that have contributed to the drop? I don't think so. I think that's going to be in June and July, but I don't know.
Well, those announcements actually were kind of after the survey week too, I think.
There was I think the first one was May 6th. and then
Okay.
started trickling out. I mean, it's really
Yeah.
close to the reference week, so
Yeah, no, maybe.
I don't think it did.
I don't
Yeah.
think so. Yeah, too close.
Too early. Too
And
soon.
yeah, I mean, you got to be really paying attention. Chris, what's your statistic?
So that was actually mine. So I'll give you another one. I had
Oh, so you
Dante's-
came unprepared, is what you're saying?
That was my best one. No, I'll give him the other one is 5.4.
He shows up late.
Yeah.
5.4%.
5. Oh,
5.4%. It's quarter on quarter seasonally
Oh.
adjusted annual rate. Ryan knows
Ryan-
it. Dante
Ryan-
should know this.
I know
Dante
that
should
one.
know. Dante knows
Is that
this one.
productivity growth?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There you go. Productivity
There you
growth.
go.
That was so that's pretty strong. That's about as strong.
That's quite
as-
strong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, about as strong as it gets, or does it get stronger than that? I mean, in
It's-
historical.
In coming out of recessions, after the Great Recession was a bit stronger. I can't remember how high it got, but that's to be expected. So, given where we are, I do think it's strong, and I think it points to potential for some extended, faster productivity growth, and that's given the demographic discussion we had a couple weeks ago, it's critical for our long run economic growth story.
Yeah, that's a good one. Hey, would you guys mind if I give you a couple statistics that aren't related to the labor market, just to mix it up a little bit, because we're going to come back to the labor market in just a second. Okay, and you I'm guessing you'll know these two pretty quickly, but I thought they came out this week, and I thought they're very important. First is 13%. What is 13%? What statistic is 13%?
Oh, house price growth.
Yeah, house price growth, the core logic house price growth. And did you look at that release carefully, Chris? Do you want to talk about that at all? I mean, so what you saw in that report?
It feels like a year ago. I don't remember much more than the 13% year over year.
Right. Well, do you remember which states had the highest rates of house price growth over the past year?
I believe it was Idaho.
Yep. 20%, Arizona, South Dakota, of course, small state, but kind of 20% growth rates. Obviously, that you can't sustain that for very long. That's really boom-like kind of house price growth. And goes to our podcast last week. And here's one more. I'm going to give you one more, and this is important. I think also 2.25%. 2.25%. And if you're a careful reader of Economic View, and I know Dante is, because you are managing Economic View now, aren't you, Dante? You're.
I'm slowly trying to wrestle some of it away from Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah. Ryan has been running that since the beginning of time, and he's slowly handing that off to Dante. So okay.
Slowly.
But you guys, so both of you guys are very careful consumers of that website and all the releases. So what is 2.25%? No, really?
It's not inflation expectations, is it?
Yes, it is. It is
Oh, okay.
inflation expectations, and that's pretty high actually, and it's moving up pretty fast. Now, it's moved up quickly most recently because of consumer surveys. The University of Michigan survey asks 1 year ahead and 5 year ahead inflation expectations, and both have moved up. And that, I think, Ryan, you pointed out that tends to be more transitory. It's related to gas prices and
Food prices.
What's happening right now. So that may not be, you might not place as much weight on that, but also the survey of professional economists, which we belong to, that has also pushed up, and all of that combined, because that inflation expectations measure that I'm pointing to is a combination of a range of inflation expectation measures. And 2.25%, this is core consumer expenditure deflator inflation. That's at the high end of the range you would think that they would tolerate, the Federal Reserve would tolerate. The Fed wants it to be a little bit above 2, but much above 2.25%, I think that would be, they must be getting they might get a little uncomfortable with that, I would think. Do you think so as well? Or
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, you would agree.
But if you look at I mean, we factor in market-based expectations as well, but the market seems to be buying into the Fed's narrative that this is going to be transitory. 5-year forwards, when you adjust it for, the gap between the CPI and PCE deflator, is spot on 2%. I mean, it seems like that's what they're buying into now. but we'll see if that holds up.
Yep, very good. And remember, we had, each of us identified one statistic that we were going to call out every single week, let people know what it is, and give them a little bit of context. Ryan, what was your statistic that you wanted to mention?
The 10-year Treasury yield.
Yeah, and so where do we stand on that? By the way, with regard to 10-year Treasury yield, that was down today, right?
Right.
So how do you interpret that?
I think we're in this period where I don't want to say the May employment report was bad news, but when you get data that comes in a little bit weaker than the consensus, not significantly weaker, but just weak enough where markets know, all right, the Fed's not going to claim this is further substantial improvement in the economy and are moving closer to tapering or raising the Fed funds rate. So data just below the consensus is actually likely going to be perceived as dovish by the bond market.
Got it. So the 10-year yield, I think, ended today at 1.55.
Was it 1.55?
I thought it was. I thought it was off 5 or 6 basis points, and that's a pretty big move in one day for the bond market. So it looks like bond investors did in fact interpret the jobs number as dovish. That it's not enough job growth to really cause the Fed to change its path for future normalization.
Yeah, because it seems like the bond market's getting a little nervous that this tapering announcement could come sooner. As early as the Jackson Hole synopsis in August. I think the Fed's going to wait to make that announcement until a little bit later. But every data point that comes in next week, we get the CPI. I mean, that's going to be really, really important in assessing, when the Fed's going to taper. But I mean, if you look through the ups and downs in the 10-year, it's been moving sideways, or it's been very range bound for several weeks now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Chris, what was your statistic that you call out?
UI claims weekly.
Yeah. What were they?
385,000 yesterday. So an improvement. I think it was 405 the week before. So moving in the right direction, certainly.
And good. And good is what? What is good?
250, 300.
Yep,
it's pretty good.
So we're 385 moving south, but we got a long way to go before it's at a place that you'd feel, hey, this is a good economy. Right. We're in a good place. Okay. Dante, do you have a statistic that you follow on a regular basis that we should be following? Just to give you a sense of where things are, where they're headed. You don't have to have one. I just was curious.
I mean, claims is a thing on a weekly
you probably have
basis,
secrets like Ryan. Ryan holds out on me. He doesn't give me, you see what he says? He says, I'll tell you afterwards. And then he disappears very quickly after the podcast is over. I don't hear from him. You have any, you're going to tell us what your secret sauce is, or do you have any suggestions on what we should be looking at?
No secret. I think like Chris, claims, I think on a weekly basis is the most important thing that I watch.
Okay. All right. Very good. And the statistic I called out was copper prices. And they, I think I looked earlier today, it was like $4.55 a pound. And as you may recall, anything over $4, that's consistent with a very strong economy, global economy with significant inflationary pressures. So that hasn't come down to any appreciable degree. It's leveled off over the last few weeks, but so it's not rising, which is a good thing, but it still remains very, very elevated. Okay. That's the statistic. Anything else on the statistics you want to say real fast before we move on to the big topic and we go deep into the labor market? No?
Just to follow, what about oil at 70? Does that concern you?
In what way, Chris? Inflationary pressures, you mean?
Yeah. Is it indicative, or are consumers going to start reacting to higher gas prices?
Well, I think that does contribute to the higher inflationary expectations, but I'm not overly concerned about it because there's still a surfeit of oil out there globally. Just for give you people a sense of the numbers, before the pandemic, we were globally consuming and producing just about 100 million barrels a day of oil on the nose. When the pandemic hit, demand obviously got crushed. We got down to 90 million barrels of oil a day of oil demand. Of course, OPEC cut back. The production in the fracking fields here in the U.S. and North America got pulled back as it was no longer economic. And that supply caught up with the collapse in demand, and prices kind of stabilized. And demand is now picking up. and supply is a little bit slow to pick up, although OPEC is now has started to increase production, and I think this last week decided to increase production again. So I expect supply to pick up here and meet demand, and I don't expect oil prices to go much higher than this. If they started to spike for whatever reason, in the context of everything else going on, that might be somewhat disconcerting. But at this point, no, $70 it's on the high side of fair value, on the high side of equilibrium, but not that outside the band of what's a reasonable price, I think.
Do you think the economy's cushioned a little bit more from rising oil prices and prices at the pump than it was pre-pandemic? I mean, our sensitivity to oil prices is diminished over a long period of time. But I remember, what's our rule of thumb? Every penny change in retail gasoline prices pre-pandemic reduced consumer spending by 1.1, 1.2 billion over the course of a year.
Yeah, that's right.
We have all this excess savings. So I think maybe we could be less concerned about, the price at the pump on the demand side. I mean, like for economic activity, but inflation, that's going to be the Fed's bigger concern.
And of course, the other development that was even pre-pandemic is the United States is on net is no longer a net consumer of oil. It's kind of a wash. We here in the U.S. of that 100 million barrels a day of oil global demand, we're 10 million barrels in a typical economy, and we produce about 10 million barrels. So it means much less to us now from a macro perspective. But we should have a podcast on oil. That would be a good one, actually, because we've got a lot of, I think, interesting things to say there and some good people. Maybe bring in climate change as an issue as well. That would be a good thing. But let's turn to the big topic, and that's the job market. And of course, a lot of kind of odd things going on in the labor market. The thing that's most odd is that we've got a record number of open job positions. This is data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics JOLTS survey, Job Opening Labor Turnover Survey. I think it's a little bit lagged. I think the last data point is still for the month of March. We're going to get April next week, I think. We got up to 8 million open positions, record high. But at the same time, we have this very high level of unemployment and underemployment. The 5.8% unemployment rate, I think we're over 10% on the U6, which is the underemployment rate. So Dante, how do you square that circle? How can we have, all these record number of open positions and at the same time have all these unemployed? What's going on fundamentally? And here, I want you to do it this way. I want you to begin with the single most important reason, and then we're going to go down to, because I'm guessing there's more than one reason here, but I don't want you to lead with your weakest argument. I want to lead with your strongest argument, and we'll go one by one here. So what's at the top of the list of reasons?
I think it's still, there's a lot more friction in the labor market today, given the turmoil over the last year, than we would normally think coming out of a recession. There's more scarring, there's more damage.
What does that mean? Scarring damage? Concretely, what are you talking about?
We've got healthcare issues, we've got childcare issues, we've got a lot more reasons why people are hesitant to rejoin the labor market than they would be in a normal recovery. Things that would normally be happening in recovery, just be people trying to find jobs. Now it's not just should I find a job, it's do I have to take care of my kids? Do I have to take care of my elderly parents who are sick? Am I worried about getting sick myself? There's just a lot more concerns today than there are in a normal recovery.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I would frame it, I'm curious, I think I'm saying the same thing you are, but let me just say it and you tell me if you think about it, this is consistent with the way you're thinking about it, that, hey, this economy came to life very quickly. The economy reopened. I mean, think back 6-8 weeks ago, there's still big parts of the economy, particularly obviously in the Northeast and on the West Coast, not so much in other parts of the country, but broadly, the economy was still dormant. You had big parts of the economy that just weren't open, or, if there were businesses, they were open, they were operating at half capacity or quarter capacity. And it really hasn't been until very recently, probably, again, not for the last 6-8 weeks, that all of a sudden we felt like vaccinations had succeeded well enough that we could open up to significant enough degree. So everything took off, demand took off, and every employer out there that survived the pandemic put up a help wanted sign, proverbially speaking, at the same time. And it just takes some time for people who haven't been working, not on a job, particularly those that have permanently lost their previous job, or as you point out, having to stay at home to take care of kids or parents or the people who are sick, to get their lives in order to a point where they can just take a job. It's just doesn't happen in a day. It doesn't happen in a week. It doesn't even happen in a month. People got to figure this out. And that's the process that we're in the middle of. That's how I kind of think about it, is in the frame I would use. It sounds like that's similar to what you're saying.
It is. I think we're expecting an unprecedented recovery in the labor market, something that we've never seen before, and we're expecting that coming out of damage that we've never seen happen before. You talked about earlier, average job gains are 478,000 so far this year. That's below expectation somehow today. At the beginning of the year, that number would have been great. People would have been happy about that. Somehow today we're sitting here saying, what happened to job growth? I have a quiz for you. How many times in history have we had a 5-month period where average job growth was 478,000?
How many times in history have we had, say that again, how many times in history have we had, we like games
job
here
growth averaging
inside economics. We love games. Go ahead.
How many times has job growth averaged 478,000 or better over a 5-month period, which is what we have happening right now?
I'd say there probably was a period after World War II, so in the 1950s. I'm guessing probably in the late 60s, Vietnam War, Great Society, so that's 2. I probably coming out of the early 80s recession, because it went from, high unemployment to rip roaring very quickly because the Fed lowered interest rates. I'd say that's 3. I'd say 3 times in history since World War II.
What about after the pandemic?
Oh, no, I'm not including that. I'm not including.
Yeah, I'm excluding
okay.
that. Yeah, last summer.
Yeah. Well,
you have the number right. The timing's a little off. It was once in 1941, once in 1946.
Hold it. 1941. Oh, lead up to World War II. Is that what that is?
And then,
okay. Is this seasonally adjusted, yes. Dante? Are you looking at seasonally adjusted data?
It is seasonally adjusted, yeah.
You got to be very precise here, and when you play these games with us, this is key. I don't want any seasonally unadjusted data, messing.
Never.
Okay, fair
we enough. Just lost half the listeners. If you're seasonally adjusted, I'm out.
I'm out of here. No, okay, all right, okay. 1941. Okay, I got a little bit wrong, I guess. Yeah, go ahead. I'm
1946,
skeptical.
which you were.
Oh, I got that. Yeah.
And then 1984, which you hit.
Oh,
those are the 3.
Okay. Oh, so what happened in the late 60s? Really? Okay, but pretty good. I'd say that was a pretty impressive. You were impressed, weren't you, that I could do that?
That was good. And the highest that we ever hit coming out of the Great Recession was only 262,000, the highest average.
That is interesting. Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. That gives you real context. Yeah. Very good. Okay. Hey, Ryan and Chris, you heard the number one reason for this seeming disconnect between all the open positions and all the unemployed. Would you put that, Dante, and my reason at the top of the list, or do you have another factor that you would put at the top? Or is your thinking consistent with that?
So pandemic frictions, not only fear of getting the disease, but the fallout in terms of childcare, elder care, right? All of that. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, that's how I would say it. I mean, I'd put them all together. Yeah.
My issue with these reasons is that they're all because expanded UI benefits. That's clearly
we're going to come back to that.
We will, but that's clearly a big one. But then I see them as
no. It's not clearly a big one. It's not clearly a big one. It is on the list, but okay. I'm not going
on the list. You're not going to concede.
I'm not conceding, but go ahead. Fair enough. Go ahead. I'll stop.
But I think they're all interrelated, right?
Yeah.
One reason why I might be able to, take some time to care for my family is because I have a UI benefit. So what's the real reason for not re-entering the labor market right away? So and I have some savings, right? So accumulated savings is another reason that
Great point.
I might delay. So I don't know. We can debate these, and it sounds like we will, but I don't know how much it really adds to the conversation at the end of the day, which one is the most important, because I see that they're all intermingled.
Well, it's only important in the context of policy and policy design, because, I can guarantee you, maybe not for me, but you guys are going to be around at the next recession, and the same thing's going to come up again. And we're going to come right back to this period right now. And we got to get this history right. If we don't get this history right, then we're going to make policy. We're going to make policy mistakes in the future. So that's why it's important, I think, right now.
Okay, fair enough. To that point, I think we have to wait then to look back, because all this data is being revised.
And by the way, Dante, you've got to, because we got a lot of natural experience. Let's turn to UI for a second. So, obviously on the list, and I believe it is on the list, is supplemental UI. So as part of the American Rescue Plan, workers that are unemployed get $300 a week extra pay on top of the regular UI through the start of September. And the argument has been, and you hear this anecdotally all the time from business people in particular, that the UI payment with the supplemental UI, the 300 plus, is greater than the wages that many of these workers were getting, in their jobs pre-pandemic. So they don't have an incentive to come back into the workforce, at least not quickly into the labor market. My sense of that is, well, I'm not going to tell you what my sense of it is. So you already have it. You already know what I'm thinking. What do you guys think of that? Where is that on the list? It's not at the top of the list, but where is it on the list of things that are going on here? Dante?
It's pretty far down. It's pretty far down my list. I don't think it's a non-factor, but I think people are making a much bigger deal out of it than it really is. And I think it goes back to your point about, we have an unprecedented number of job openings. You had essentially all these firms, like you said, hanging their help wanted sign at the same time. It's harder to find workers in that environment when there are, you're competing against everyone, essentially. Everyone's hiring. And so how hard is it to find, even though there are lots of unemployed workers, there are also, more people than ever that are trying to hire those workers. And so I think we're still hiring people at almost 500,000 a month clip. Where job growth is still strong. It's just that for individual firms, it looks like there aren't any workers because they're competing against so many other firms at the same time to get those workers as they come back.
Yeah, good way of putting it. Chris, what do you think? Brian, where would you put it on the list?
I'm similar to Dante. It's probably on the lower end. But the last beige book kind of made me question that. So the beige book is it's a collection of anecdotes and conversations that each Fed district has with businesses in their district. And throughout all the labor market discussion, it was, we're offering $50 payments for people just to show up to an interview. We never heard that after the financial crisis. There was lots of mentions that people were waiting to re-enter because of receiving government payments, meaning UI. So I still think it's way below childcare. It's below healthcare concerns, but I don't think it's inconsequential. I think it's having an impact, but it's just not. I think people are making too much out of it.
Yeah, Chris, what do you think? Where would you put it on the list?
Yeah, I do think the pandemic is number one. But I do think it has some significant impact. So I wouldn't put it too far down the list, I guess, maybe closer to the middle. But again, coming back to my argument that everything is kind of interdependent, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, the fortunate thing here, I guess, is that we're getting data points, right? We have a lot of natural experiments, because I think we're up to 25 states that say they're going to end their programs, the supplemental UI program, this month or in July or August, and not wait till September. So I think we'll be able to use that data to get a better sense of this. And in fact, I think Dante, you said you're going to do this study when we get the data points, right? Yeah.
I'm hoping to look at those states, and supplemental UI early and see if there's any noticeable impact there.
Okay, I got another. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to throw out another fact from the report that might contribute here. Did you happen to look at teen unemployment 16 to 19-year-olds.
I did not.
It's
no.
9.6%, the lowest it's been since
Historically low.
1953.
Yep.
Right. So that's an argument now going around that suggests, hey, that's an indication that, you know, the employers are getting, you know, looking wherever they can for workers, and because teens can't collect unemployment, therefore, you know, they're soaking up jobs or taking up jobs. So that isn't an argument that unemployment benefits are in fact having this disincentive effect.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. I'll have to go take a look. Is the decline in unemployment related to stronger job growth or weaker labor force, or both? Do you know?
I don't know.
I think it's job growth. I think I saw that the share of teens that are employed is also historically high. So I think it is because of actual job growth in that group.
Okay. Oh, interesting. I'll have to go take a look at that.
And I mean, the other thing to consider is it's hard to separate all these factors because it could be partly UI, but you could have also worked in the restaurant industry and then go through this pandemic and be like, this wasn't for me. So now you're changing, industry. So you're going into retail or transportation. So it may not be, oh, UI is keeping me out, but I got to go back to school or do, an online course or something to, retrain and get new skills to get out of an industry that maybe you don't even want to go back to.
Yeah, my sense of it, or my just intuition, and we'll have to see, do the study, do the work, and look at the data. But my intuition is that what's going on is the UI is giving people, just buying them some time. They don't necessarily need to take the first job that comes across the transom, and we probably don't want them to, right? Because we want them to match better with the job. So that means that they'll stay on the job for a longer period of time. You have less turnover. That's good for the employer. That's good for the worker. So it's a feature, not a bug. But if it just delays the actual date of when someone starts a job by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, you're going to see it have an impact on the labor market, on jobs. So that to me feels like what most fundamentally is going on here. But we'll see.
Did you see the employment report that there was 2.5 million people that were not in the labor force but want a job but didn't look in the past year? That's a large number of people, and that's not UI, because you would be counted as unemployed to receive UI. So, I mean, maybe that's one area to look into.
Yep. Hey, I have one other theory I want to just throw out and see what you guys think. And that is, it does appear that there's a surge in business formation. So we get data from the Bureau of Census on EIN numbers. We talked about this in previous podcasts. Employer identification number. So you start a company, you're going to have to file taxes and unemployment insurance, and so you need a taxpayer identification number, an EIN. And this data is very timely. I think we have data on a weekly basis, may even be daily. But I look at the weekly data through the end of May, I believe. And it is just going through the roof, stratospheric, and it's across lots of industry, all the different industries. It's across the board. Could it be the case? Two things. One, that there's a lot more job growth going on than we think. The BLS, when they construct these employment estimates, at least initially based on the survey, is they have a model that they use to predict the number of jobs that are being created by firms that are starting, because they obviously can't observe the starting firms not in their survey. So they make a guesstimate based on a model. That generally works pretty good in an economy that's moving in a straight line, but one like this one, which is and where business formations are surging, pretty likely they're not picking up a lot of what's going on at those new companies, and there's probably a lot of job growth there. So that'll become evident in the data once there's revisions. The BLS will so-called benchmark its survey-based information to actual employment accounts from unemployment insurance records. But that's a year or two down the road. It's going to take a while for us to see that. So there are a lot more jobs, but that may also be contributing to the issues that businesses are having, right? Getting workers. If they're starting companies or working for new startups, that makes it much more difficult for established businesses to find workers as well. So what do you think about that? Again, that's definitely not on the top of my list, but I don't think it's on anybody's list. So I'm just throwing it out there to see what you think about that idea.
Yeah, I definitely buy that. I mean, one of the big concerns at the beginning of the pandemic was how BLS was going to handle measurement in April and May of 2020, when all of these firms were dying and they didn't have any way to observe that in real time. And you have the same, and in hindsight, they actually did a pretty good job then, based on the revisions that we got, but it doesn't mean they're going to do well on the other side. And so I think there is always the concern that we're missing a big swath of jobs that are being created because there's new formation today.
Yeah.
But aren't a lot of the formations for businesses that don't intend to hire, so they're like, self-employed? That would show up not necessarily in the establishment survey, so that 559,000 number we referenced earlier, but the household survey, right? Because people would be counted as self-employed better there. So that would, if your theory holds up, you would have a bigger gap between household employment, of course, adjusting it for all, making it apples to apples versus the current employment survey.
That's true, but if you look at the data, the census gives you the number of EINs for all new companies, and then those for companies that say they will be adding employees, and that's about 35%. So it's not a majority, but it's not an inconsequential number of firms that are starting. And it's interesting, a lot of them are in the retail sector, in construction and manufacturing and professional services. It's pretty broad-based. It's surprisingly broad-based. Restaurants. Yep. I did want to bring up another kind of oddity in the labor market that I'm just curious as to how you're thinking about this, is wage growth. Wage growth has held up admirably well during the pandemic. Now, admittedly, there's different measures of wages. Some are not as good as others. The data we get from the employment report on average hourly earnings probably isn't all that useful because it's affected by the mix of jobs, whether it's low paying or high paying, mix of occupations. So a lot of measurement issues. But if you look at the employment cost index, the ECI from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, quarterly data, but it controls for all these mix issues. It shows that wage and salary growth for private sector workers through Q1 of 2021 is still about 3% per annum, which is year over year. And actually in Q1 was actually higher than that. It actually surged in Q1 2021. And that's about where it was pre-pandemic. So very curious how you're thinking about that. What do you think is going on here? Why, despite the pandemic and the amazingly, the damage it obviously has done to the labor market and the economy, wage growth has held up as well as it has. Any perspectives on that, Dante?
My explanation has always been because of the dichotomy and the impact of the pandemic. You had lots of firms that failed, because they were not in good financial position, and so because they failed, they're not weighing on job growth because they're gone completely. The firms that survived, we're still doing fine in large part. They could work remotely. Demand wasn't impacted all that much, and those surviving firms were maybe not unaffected, but sort of humming along. Things in professional services and in finance and in high paying industries with generally higher wage growth, you had very little impact in a lot of those industries, and so they've been propping up wage growth, I think.
Yeah. So it's just this the kind of the frontline industries, they got hit hard, and in those industries you may cut jobs, but you probably won't cut wages for the folks that you keep on, right? Because they're kind of keeping them. The businesses operating during the pandemic, but in the rest of the economy that wasn't on the front lines, they kind of those industries navigated through no problem, and labor markets were exceedingly tight before the pandemic. So wage growth held up pretty well. Does that sound right to you, Chris, Ryan? Does that theory sound right?
It sounds right. I'd throw out another one. If you go back to the productivity number at the top, if you believe that, if you think that productivity growth is genuine and real, and we've gotten better at doing our jobs, then it could be that individuals are capturing more of their marginal product, right? So wages are going up.
Well, that would be a great thing, right?
Because that's the ideal, right?
That's the idea. It's a win-win. The workers get higher wages, businesses can maintain their profit margins, and inflation remains where it is, right? So that would be pretty good. So do you think, is that what you think's going on here, Chris? That,
I think partially, because
yeah,
workers don't have as much bargaining power, certainly, as they used to. So to the extent that, there is greater productivity, how much of that is being passed on to workers? Some, but probably not all of it. So I think it's a contributing factor, but Dante's argument probably holds water as well.
right. And I guess the one concern, I mean, strong wage, how can you be against strong wage growth? I mean, that's a good thing. But I guess the concern would be if there isn't stronger sustained productivity growth and
right,
the economy continues to improve, unemployment continues to decline, the labor market continues to tighten, wage growth starts to accelerate, that is the recipe for higher inflation, right? Businesses at that point, because they're not getting the productivity gains, the wage growth is outstripping the productivity gains, unit labor costs are rising quickly. If their margins are coming under pressure, they start to raise prices more aggressively and you have inflation. So that would be the concern, I guess.
Yeah. Or if if the wage gains are artificial, right? If they are being boosted by, government policy, and once that policy expires, because wages don't, they tend to be sticky, they may not adjust, right? We could end up in an environment where that productivity growth is not justifying the higher the wage.
Yeah, I guess that's the other point. I mean, I heard a theory that, you remember last month there was this surge in wages at leisure and hospitality, in the leisure hospitality industry, and that was used as an argument for, labor shortages and UI and that kind of thing. And someone pointed out that tips are coming back. So there was no tipping because no one was going to a restaurant. All of a sudden you open up the restaurant and now people are getting tipped again, and that gets into the numbers. And of course, no seasonal adjustment's going to capture that, right? Because it's just has nothing to do with seasonality. So that's contributing to the bump up we saw in Q1 and coming into Q2, and would prove to be more temporary. Certainly not inflationary, but more temporary. Okay, any insight on that? Any Ryan, you want to put forward?
No, I haven't heard the tipping thing. That's really interesting because average hour earnings in leisure and hospitality are up 17% annualized over the last 3 months, which is massive. Yeah. So that's something I'm going to dig into. That's really interesting.
So we're already, this conversation has been going on for a while. Hard to believe. I mean, it's been very good. But I'm going to open up, make this, usually I have this pretty well scripted, but let me just open it up a little bit. There's so many labor market issues we can talk about, in the pandemic, on the other side of the pandemic, longer run. Dante, is there any issue out there you think we should be talking about that people aren't talking about, or something you want to call out about the labor market that we should be thinking about? Anything at all? This is a open-ended question. You can take it anywhere you want to take it.
Sure. The one thing I've been thinking about a lot is what happens.
By the way, this better be good. This better be good. Right?
I'll give you your money's worth.
Okay, go ahead. Right.
There's been a lot of talk about childcare and parents and the impact of the pandemic. And so one of the things I think is key to watch is what happens to labor force participation for women coming out of the pandemic, right? We had a long period, 50 years, where there was big increases in participation. And then, basically from 2000 to 2020, it was essentially flat. It dipped, and then pre-pandemic, it basically got back to where it had been in the early 2000s and looked like it was, on its way higher and higher above. I think 77% is right about where it was pre-pandemic. And then obviously it, fell off a cliff. And so is there any sort of structural change as a result of the pandemic, as a result of people leaving the workforce to care for kids? Do they all come back? How long does that take? I think in terms of policy, it begs questions about affordable childcare and things like that. If we're talking about increasing participation among women and parents more broadly, if we can make childcare more affordable, that makes that calculus to participate in the labor market a lot easier for more families. And so I think that's the thing that I'm watching longer term.
Got it. And how many kids do you have? You've got I think you've got
2.
two. And is your wife working? Is she working at home?
We're
She
both
works?
working at home. Yep.
Both working at home. And has the pandemic changed any of your work arrangements? I mean, are you both going to go back to work, or has this changed things for you in any way?
My wife is still currently debating leaving her job. It's been an on again, off again, but we've survived 15 months now with our kids at home, and so it's just been less sleep. That's all the pandemic has done so far. But we'll see.
Yeah. So this is a very personal question for you, how this all plays out.
It is, yeah.
So let us know what happens in your own family life, and we'll get a pretty good grip, I think, on what the rest of the world is doing here. Okay, very good.
I think it should be a reality TV show. All right.
No. Maybe a spinoff of my reality.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm first. Yeah.
All right. All right.
All right. Well, thanks, Dante. Thanks for joining us, and great discussion. And we could go on forever, and I'm sure we will. We'll come back to the labor market in the not too distant future. Let me just say a few things about the labor market. First, and this is pretty obvious, things are obviously moving in the right direction here. We are quickly recovering from the pandemic. I do think we're going to get something close to 500,000 jobs per month going forward until we get close to full employment, which I would anticipate by late 2022 going into 23. But the second thing is that still feels like a long time from now. This is, that just gives you a sense of how deep a hole the pandemic created for us and the job market. And, we're still crawling out, and it's going to take us, perhaps as long as 2 years to get fully out of this. And I think the third thing I'd say is on the other side of the pandemic, I do think the labor market's going to be front and center again. I mean, if you remember back prior to the pandemic, the number one business problem was a very tight labor market. Labor shortages were endemic. It was top of mind for most business people. And that's our future. I think we are going to have very tight labor markets, and we are going to have to address it through policy. And we didn't talk about immigration. We're going to have to come back and talk about that at some point in the podcast. But immigration, a reversal of immigration patterns, is going to have to occur. We need more immigrants, and when I say that, I mean obviously skilled workers, but also I think we're going to need a lot of unskilled workers as well. And I do think policies that will help to bring down the cost of childcare, allow female and participation in general to rise will be critical to ensuring that. And of course, that was part of Biden's American Family Plan. I think that was a significant part of it. But those are the kinds of policies we're going to need if we're going to have the workers that we're going to need to be able to grow and enjoy solid growth in the future. So there's going to be a lot to talk about here. But the good news is on Jobs Day Friday, I have to say it feels pretty good. We are on our way back. So with that, let's call it a podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you next week. Take care now.